My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. I'm going to break down the entire UFC Paris fight card, giving you my picks, predictions, and DraftKings plays. But before I jump in, go to WeWantPicks.com and become a premium member. Premium membership is only $10 a month, and not only do we give you all the DraftKings things you could ever need, we give you our picks, predictions, and bets. And if we're talking about DraftKings, we give you player ownership, player rankings. We take every single fighter in a price category and rank them by salary and projected points to be scored. And then on top of all of that, we have an optimizer. If you are serious about this, you know what an optimizer is. But if you don't know what an optimizer is, you go in there. It is pre-populated with the players and fighters, their projected ownership, and their projected point that they will score. You select who you want to keep out of your lineup, who you want to put in your lineup, as many or as few fighters as you know. And then the optimizer will build your lineup for you. It will say, okay, well, we know you want Cyril Gane. We know you don't want so-and-so. Here's the lineup based on ownership and projected points to be scored. And you can build up to 150 lineups using that optimizer. All of this for $10 a month. WeWantPicks.com. At the top, click become a member. You could think I'm a moron and my insight is absolute dog shit, but it doesn't matter because the ownership projections and the optimizer alone are worth way more than $10. Mute me. Go use the optimizer. WeWantPicks.com. Click become a member at the top. So let's go ahead and break this fight card down. This is going to be a tricky DraftKings card because we had a couple of big-time favorites, a whole bunch of short-notice opponents, a couple of short-notice fights, a bunch of UFC debuts, and all of this is on a card taking place in Paris, France for the first time ever, which means we're going to have some sketchy judges. This is a weird card. This is a tricky card. We're breaking it down the best we can, but do not be surprised with some weirdo decisions and some people either outperforming or not performing based on the pressure. So we're going to start right at the opening fight. We got Stephanie Egger. She is a UFC veteran at this point. She's got nasty judo. She uses that judo to get you to the ground and work from there. She does have a bunch of stoppages on her record, but those are people she was able to out-grapple, right? She bullied them to the ground, elbowed them in the face, bullied them to the ground, submitted them. She is coming off this submission loss to Mayra Bueno Silva this month. I mean, the fights are in September, but the reality is within a month was this loss. And it's a quick turnaround. That was a fast fight. She got the takedown, but then ultimately she was submitted. And then obviously Tracy Cortez beat her as well. So, you know, I would not say that this submission loss means she's not good on the ground. She is very capable on the ground. She was just sort of caught in an armbar during a throw. And she's taking on Ailin Perez. There's not going to be any data here. This is her UFC debut. And Ailin Perez was supposed to be on this card. She was supposed to have an original opponent. That opponent dropped. Stephanie Egger stepped up on short notice. Here's the thing. I think Stephanie Egger wins this fight. I think that she uses her judo, gets the takedowns, and then rides out a decision on top. I don't think she'll get a stoppage. With that being said, Ailin Perez is a grappler. She's a good, well-rounded prospect, decent striking, and then she comes forward, bullies her opponents to the ground. The only reason I'm not picking Ailin Perez to win this fight is because her takedowns are clinch-based. And that's exactly what Stephanie Egger wants to do with her judo. So if Ailin shot like doubles and singles and shot at the legs, I think she could win this fight. For DraftKings, I think Ailin's a very good underdog at $6,900. I think she can get this done. My pick is Stephanie Egger to win the fight. I am absolutely not putting Stephanie Egger in my lineup at $9,300. That is a lot of money to spend on a short notice, different continent, after a loss turnaround for somebody, you know, who primarily is a judo person. So fading Stephanie Egger, Ailin Perez, I don't know if I'm going to have her in my lineup, but $6,900, if that's the price point you need, I think she's a solid dog to be looking at. Then we got Khalid Taha taking on Christian Quinones. Khalid Taha was on this card. His opponent dropped, so he has a short notice opponent in Christian Quinones. But Khalid Taha's pretty good everywhere except wrestling. He's a good kickboxer. He's got very real power, solid speed. He switches stances nicely. And on the ground, he's got decent jiu-jitsu. The problem is he's got no takedowns whatsoever. He can't get it to the ground. If you look at his official record, he's 1-3-1 in his last 5. But the reality is he should be 2-3. This was a win over Bruno Silva, but he had some USADA issues, so they overturned that, and he was away for a little bit. And these are quality losses to Hani Barcelos, Sergey Morozov. Those are quality losses. Those are very good opponents. He is fighting Christian Quinones here. Christian Quinones stepping up on short notice, making his UFC debut, official UFC debut. He did win on the Contender Series just a little while ago. So again, the circumstances are odd on this card. A lot of the fights on this card are in a similar situation. But Christian Quinones is a relentless grappler, just non-stop grappler who just keeps coming forward. And he doesn't have the cleanest technique, but he literally will make up for that with just pressure. He'll just come forward, run through you, shoot through you, nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. And what he does a really good job at is he will stand with you, get you comfortable, like, all right, I'm in a brawl, let's start swinging, and then he'll drop and shoot. So I do like Christian Quinones to win this fight. I think $7,900 is a good price point. The only thing that worries me a little bit here is that Christian Quinones can be a little hittable, and Khalid Taha hits very hard for the weight class. So this fight opened with Khalid as a decent favorite, -150, something to that effect. It's now a straight-up pick'em, and Khalid might flip to an underdog. So I am on that side. When I do my quick pick videos on Sundays, I mentioned that I like Quinones to win. It's now, Quinones may end up the favorite now that we're later in the week. So $7,900 I think is good value in a guy that I think wins this fight. Then we got Benoit Saint Denis, who frankly I think is some of the best value you're going to get on this card. I think he gets the takedowns. He doesn't need them. He probably shouldn't shoot takedowns, but I still think he gets them and then sort of pounds his way to victory. Benoit Saint Denis can strike, he can grapple, and he's not really even a cage grinding grappler. He will take legitimate shots and then shoot from there. The problem is if he plays a striking game with a very good striker, he can end up losing, like the Zaleski fight. But in that fight, he still got 2 takedowns, still had 3 minutes of control time. But this was the impressive win against Stolze. He got the submission in the second round. He had 3 takedowns, almost 7 minutes of control time. But he's fighting Gabriel Miranda. And Gabriel Miranda, UFC debut. This is very, very typical here on this card. But he's a non-stop BJJ guy. He is just, we talked in the earlier fight, Christian Quinones, non-stop forward pace wrestler. Gabriel Miranda is not a wrestler. He'll pull guard. He'll jump guard, or even if he ends up on top, he'll let you sweep him so that he can work his jiu-jitsu. He is an old school BJJ guy that will work for positions and then try to snatch up, meaning he's not factoring in his head, oh, the judges have me on my back. Let me get on top so it's not looking bad. He'll stay on his back. He'll throw things up. He'll work for scrambles. Like, he will compete as if it is a jiu-jitsu match and not a fist fight. I have to go with the better MMA fighter. This is not a jiu-jitsu match. Benoit Saint Denis probably should not go to the ground with somebody as dangerous as Gabriel Miranda, but the reality is he's skilled enough to avoid being submitted. So I think Benoit Saint Denis can win this fight anywhere he wants to. He should avoid the ground because he doesn't need to be there. You can outstrike Gabriel Miranda, no problem. But I still think Benoit Saint Denis at $9,100 something is a great value. And if you're still watching this video and it's long and blah, 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 become a premium member. If you log in, $10 at WeWantPicks.com, you'll see all of these fighters are ranked in salary group by projected earnings, meaning, all right, we have the $8,900 to $9,300 fighters, and they are ranked who will score the most points and who we think scores the fewest points. So check that out, $10 a month, WeWantPicks.com. We also give you projected ownerships and an optimizer. An optimizer. Throw Benoit Saint Denis in there, 1 or 2 other people that you're positive are going to win, and let the optimizer build the rest of your lineup based on projected earnings and ownership. That takes us to one of the more controversial fights of the night. We got Nasser Imov taking on Joaquin Buckley. You guys are split. I've seen the comment section. You guys are split down the middle. Who thinks Imov wins? Who thinks Buckley wins? Listen, Imov's a favorite. and I get why he's a favorite. He can wrestle if he needs to. Not very often, but he can wrestle if he needs to. He's got some very solid striking, and we've seen Joaquin Buckley in the past sometimes be KO or bust. I personally, well, let's look at Imov. He is coming off this great stoppage win over Shabazian. He stopped Ian Heinisch, who traditionally is a very hard guy to stop. The decision loss to Phil Hawes, I mean, that was before Phil Hawes' chin just completely evaporated into thin air. You know, Imov's a good striker, dangerous guy, and he scores his points in his wins, right? Decision wins, he still does okay. 74 points, 68 significant strikes. He had some control time with 1 takedown. So he typically earns his money. And at $9,000, if you think he gets the stoppage, then 100% this guy should absolutely be in your lineup. And I'm going to tell you, I think whatever side you're on here, that fighter should be in your lineup. Because if Joaquin Buckley wins, it's going to look pretty similar, right? Look what he did to former teammate Duraev when he knocked him out. And frankly, Joaquin Buckley earlier in his career was knockout or bust, right? Kill or be killed. Kevin Holland, with that laser pinpoint accuracy, got him. Kasanganay, this is the greatest knockout in the history of the UFC. And then this Di Chirico loss was actually a turning point for him. This was good for him because then I felt like after this fight, he stopped chasing knockouts. He was much more patient. Yes, he got the stoppage, but he was much more patient against Arroyo. Razak Al Hassan, 5 takedowns. And even in the Arroyo fight, he worked in a takedown. And then Alberto Duraev, that was a stoppage in the second round. Jacob said that, Joaquin was overextending, and if he does that, Imov will get him. I'm not going to try to convince you who I think wins. I think I like Buckley here, especially at $7,200. The upside of him getting that knockout, and that's what he does, is knock people out. I'm fully aware of how good Imov is. The reality is this fight is likely not going to go the distance, so pick your side. If you think Imov gets the knockout at $9,000, then you should have him in your lineup because he'll score. He'll earn that $9,000. If you think Buckley wins this fight, then $7,200. He's probably the best pick on the entire card if he ends up winning. Then we got Faraz Ziam taking on Mikhail Figlak. Very aggressive last name. Faraz Ziam, he's a rangy striker, right? He does work well in the clinch, but he likes to stay on the outside, pick his shots, circle, and play that game, right? That's what he wants to be doing in his fights. And if we take a look, Terrence McKinney just steamrolled this dude. Absolutely steamrolled him. And I do think that's why the pricing looks like this. I think it's a lot of recency bias here because Faraz Ziam is technical and is good, and his price point is a bit disrespectful. He did smoke Luigi Vendramini and that, and when I say smoke, it's a typical Faraz Ziam decision. Very low volume. Look at these. I mean, very low volume and just dancing around on the outside. He doesn't typically get finished because he's hard to get to because he is playing that outside game. And he's fighting Mikhail Figlak. Where are you at, buddy? Here we go. Another UFC debut. This card is riddled with them. Figlak is a powerful striker. He can grapple if he needs to, and he has a very aggressive style. So he is the opposite kind of striker as Ziam. That does play into Ziam's game. So Figlak will come rushing forward, and Ziam's going to, oh, great, counter-strike circle, counter-strike circle. So if that's Mikhail Figlak's game plan, come forward and strike, well, then Faraz Ziam's absolutely going to win that fight. He's going to play the outside game, and he's going to be the more technical striker. I think Figlak comes in, throws bombs, misses, gets annoyed that he's like swinging at air, and then he starts working in the grappling. And if he works in the grappling, he will absolutely get it done. Ziam has no power whatsoever, so we're not worried about Figlak getting knocked out. We're just worried about him getting outpointed. But I think we can trust him to shoot takedowns and get it done that way. I don't think he's lacking that much self-awareness that he's just going to be on the wrong side of a jab for 15 minutes in a very boring fight. So I think Figlak wins this fight, but I personally am not going to have him in my DraftKings lineup. $8,500, while that is a very middle-of-the-road price point, I just don't, I'm not going to trust the UFC debut against somebody as technical as Ziam. I'm just not going to take that chance on my DraftKings, in my DraftKings lineup. Then we have another controversial fight. I would say this is the second most controversial fight on the card. We got Dustin Stoltzfus taking on UFC newcomer Abus Magomedov. Again, this card is fucking weird, man. It's so weird. Almost every single one of these fights is a UFC debut or short notice. The only fight where both fighters had full training camps and their original opponents, I believe is the main event. I don't know of another fight on this card where it has been established for more than 6 weeks. Everything else has been put together in the last 3 or 4, and then a whole bunch of change-ups. Anyway, Dustin Stoltzfus. He was Jacob's lock of the week against Grant, and that was a split decision, but he was able to get it done. I think it was a split decision. He was able to get it done with a couple of well-timed takedowns later in the fight. But he did look decent in that. He got his first UFC win. The problem with Dustin Stoltzfus is, you know, he'll just come swinging. He'll just swing wild. He's in there to fight, and he just sort of throws the game plan out the window. But he's a talented guy. He's got power in his hands. He's got a black belt and a brown belt in multiple grappling-based martial arts. And if he wants to grapple, he can do well. He just doesn't always grapple. And he's fighting Abus Magomedov. And Abus Magomedov, listen, on paper, this guy's great. On paper, he's knocking people out with strikes that don't look like they have any power. He's shooting takedowns, taking people down. And he does a pretty good job of recognizing, I'm losing the striking here, I should grapple. My issue with Abus Magomedov is I feel like you go through his record, it's a bit hollow. And Jacob and I went through it on the full card breakdown, and his last few opponents had some decent, 10-3, something like that. But if you look a little closer, he's got a draw in there against a guy with not a great record. He's got a knockout loss against a guy who doesn't have a great record. You know, he beat somebody who had an okay record, and that person went on to lose a few fights in a row. And we've seen this before. We've seen guys who are very talented look great on the regional scene, come into the UFC and just don't look very good. So I fully recognize that Dustin Stoltzfus is stoppable, and his fight IQ sort of goes out the window when he's in there trying to have some fun. And Abus Magomedov should win this fight. He should win this fight. I think he's the more dangerous. He should win this fight. I just don't think I trust that record. I don't think I trust the regional record of Abus Magomedov. So I'm going to fade. I'm going to leave him out. I mean, watch this guy just smoke Stoltzfus and end up in an optimal lineup. But you know where that's important? Right now I'm giving you my opinion, but we have actual third-party like facts at WeWantPicks.com under premium membership. So if you go to WeWantPicks.com and click Become a Member, once you're logged in, there's a whole section dedicated to DraftKings. We have DraftKings ownership, fighter ranking by salary category, and then obviously our dog, our fade, our best value, all of that. But then we also have inside of our optimizer, yes, we have a lineup optimizer, the greatest tool anybody could ever have while building a lineup or 150 lineups. Inside of that will be projected points earned. And that's not coming from me. We're getting that from a third-party source where experts are calculating the projected ownership and the projected points each fighter will earn in their fights. That is pre-populated in the optimizer, and you go in there, you select who you want to, I definitely want these people in my lineup, fade these people, and then it will build a lineup with you using the algorithm, using the calculators. It'll build a lineup for you up to 150 different unique lineups, and then you just take that and you upload it into DraftKings. WeWantPicks.com. At the top, click Become a Member. It's $10 a month. And again, regardless of what you think my insight is, right or wrong, the optimizer, the ownership, the projected points, that alone is worth the price to play, which is freaking $10. And we're never going to raise that price on you. Anyway, promo is done. Charles Jourdain taking on Nathaniel Wood. Listen, this is a fun fight. This is a very fun fight. And pick your side and put one of these men in your lineup because both of these guys fight their asses off. Charles Jourdain, as we know, comes forward and just leaves it all out there. This dude wants to strike. He has 0 takedowns in the UFC. He wants to bang, and he can. He's got phenomenal cardio. He literally never stops coming forward, and this dude fights. He's coming off this loss to Shane Burgos. Shane Burgos took him down, I think, 3 times, or maybe it was twice. He gave up. Charles Jourdain gave up 6.5 minutes of control time. So for 6.5 minutes of that fight, Charles Jourdain was being controlled. And he still landed 161 strikes, 113 strikes total. And this 161 was more than 100 than Shane Burgos landed. Shane Burgos landed less than 61 strikes. It was incredible what Charles Jourdain did in a loss. And my point there being is Nathaniel Wood, who's coming up in weight, is going to have a hard time dealing with that pressure of Charles Jourdain. I think Charles Jourdain gets it done. I love both of their price points. Both of them are priced very well because if you think Nathaniel Wood wins, well, he only put up 77 against Charles Rosa, but he's only priced at $7,800 in this fight. And the Charles Rosa fight, you know, some could say, I can't believe he didn't stop Charles Rosa, right? Nathaniel Wood's not, if you can't stop Charles Rosa in that fight, you're not very good. I would say this dude had 2 10-8 rounds against somebody as tough as Rosa, and that's incredible. So I personally have Charles Jourdain winning this fight. I will likely have him in my DraftKings lineup. Jacob has Nathaniel Wood as his lock of the week, and he's on an 8-fight lock, or is it 9? 8 or 9 fight lock of the week win streak, and his lock of the week is an underdog. He grabs an underdog every single week, puts his mortgage on it, tells you, and really lets it fly, and he's got 8 in a row, only underdog. So, you know, while I normally just don't care what he thinks, right? I don't want him to, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, I don't want him to influence my picks. You know, it's getting to the point where, uh-oh. So anyway, Nathaniel Wood is his lock of the week. I personally think Charles Jourdain's pressure, aggression, the fact that he never stops, his cardio, he will be in your face no matter what. I think Charles Jourdain wins this fight. I like him at that price point. He'll probably be in my lineup. That takes us to 2 UFC newcomers. It is essentially, let me scroll up a little more. This is essentially, I mean, there's nothing to show here, but we're showing anyway. Dry eyes. This is essentially a Contender Series fight. We got William Gomez, and he's taking on Jarno Errens. It actually should be a pretty exciting fight. William Gomez, he's a well-rounded guy. He's constantly looking for a finish. He can knock you out. He can submit you, or he can just old school outwork you. And he's pretty good everywhere. He's got solid Muay Thai striking, really solid grappling, but it's more opportunistic. So he'll snatch things up instead of, you know, looking to do that as plan A. He'll work it in scrambles and things like that. But he can back up, and he can be a bit gun shy where he'll back up and he'll wait to counter. So if you're not coming at him aggressively, he may not throw much at all. And he is fighting Jarno Errens. Why can't I find his name? There it is. He's fighting Jarno Errens, also in his UFC debut, and he's a well-rounded prospect as well. He has solid striking, solid takedowns when he needs them. But unlike Gomez, he's not a counter striker. He will come forward. He will initiate those striking exchanges. So that plays directly into what Gomez wants. Gomez does want the counter striking, does want to clinch. So while these guys are both very talented, and this should be a really fun, close fight, I do think William Gomez gets this done. He could potentially get the stoppage, although both of these guys are pretty tough. And I like William Gomez to win here. It's very hard to go ahead and tell you to spend $8,600 on a UFC debut against a UFC debut. Like, let's look at what's been happening in Contender Series. The last 2 weeks, it's been like all underdogs except for 1 or 2 fights. And that's because these are regional fighters. They're regional fighters, and you just don't know how good they are until they're actually in the UFC, because it's regional fighting regional. And you just really, it's hard to get a gauge of somebody's talent level when they're fighting regional people. With that being said, I think Gomez wins. One of these guys could potentially get a stoppage, and you can have either one in your lineup. Errens is also a live underdog at that price point, but, you know, frankly, I'm probably going to avoid the UFC debuts if I can. Then we got Nasrat Haqparast taking on John Makdessi. This is a battle of the strikers. Nasrat Haqparast arguably has more raw power, but they're both volume strikers. They'll both come forward. They'll both mix it up. They'll both throw out some volume, and they'll both try to out-volume you. Nasrat's coming off these 2 losses. The Hooker one, he was out-grappled. He was taken down a bunch. Nobody expected that, especially not Nasrat. And then the Bobby Green loss, it's freaking Bobby Green. Bobby Green's a phenomenal striker, very aggressive, impossible to hit, and it frustrated Nasrat, and Nasrat just wasn't able to get off. But he still did land 76 strikes. Every single strike was a significant strike, and the dude scored 30 points in a loss to a very good fighter. And he's fighting John Makdessi. My biggest issue with John Makdessi is how inactive he is. This is 1 a year, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 1 fight a year. And while, you know, great, 3 wins, but that was many years ago, the Trinaldo loss was a respectable loss because Francisco Trinaldo is aging better than most. The Bahamondes, that was a phenomenal win. Like, he looked great in that win. He was supposed to get torched. He was $7,300. He looked very good in that win. And that win is what actually has me concerned here, because I think John Makdessi loses this fight. But if he shows up, if Nasrat shows up looking like he did against Bobby, and Makdessi shows up looking like he did against Bahamondes, John Makdessi can win this fight. So at $7,500, I think he's phenomenal value in DraftKings. I think Nasrat wins the fight, and it's mostly because of John Makdessi's inactivity. He's had knee issues, and I think the 2 losses in a row for Nasrat, I'm really hoping it clicks him in the gear because he's a genuine prospect. He was a genuine prospect, and now all of a sudden things aren't going his way. So we're going to find out what Nasrat is made of, what he looks like when he shows up. I think Nasrat wins this fight, but John Makdessi is a live underdog. He's a technical kickboxer. This should be a kickboxing match. You know, I'm just hoping Nasrat has the cardio and the power to start to do some damage, and the older, more worn out, you know, less active John Makdessi is just a step behind in that fight. And then we have Alessio Di Chirico, and he's taking on Roman Kopylov. Alessio Di Chirico is a solid kickboxer. He's got really nice high kicks, solid with his like versatility and his striking. He's got good pressure, and his striking style is fun. It keeps his opponents guessing because you just don't know if he's going to kick, if he's going to punch, and what angle that's going to come at you. And he can wrestle as well. He's got 11 takedowns in 10 UFC fights. 2 of them were against Kevin Holland, although that was a loss. And he's a good size favorite here considering, you know, he's got quite a few losses in the UFC. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4 in the UFC. And he's you know, the fight's closer to a pick'em, but the odds open, he was a much larger favorite than that. So essentially, solid kickboxer who has wrestling as a backup plan. And he's fighting Roman Kopylov. He's also a good kickboxer. He actually has like professional kickboxing experience, but he can be a low output guy, 42 strikes, 32 significant strikes. That's low. That's very low volume. And my issue is he's not going to shoot any takedowns, and he has no answer on the ground. I do think Di Chirico will grapple, and there's just going to be a wild gap between their skills on the ground. So Di Chirico's the pick. This fight is a pick'em. I think it's a solid price point. I think Di Chirico can take him down, beat him up, potentially get the finish from there because, again, Roman Kopylov does not have much to offer on the ground. He's got that wrestling backup game plan. He's got more MMA experience. And, you know, even Roman's MMA record outside the UFC is a bit hollow, and he hasn't found a win in the UFC just yet. So I like Di Chirico to win, and I think it will be his 5th decision in the UFC. Co-main event, Robert Whittaker, Marvin Vettori. I think Robert Whittaker wins this fight. I don't see how, I just don't see how Marvin Vettori is going to win. Robert Whittaker should be the far better striker. He's going to dance around, do what he does. Light up the legs, light up the head, come charging in, come out of the pocket, work in takedowns. Robert Whittaker should be the champion right now. He won this fight. He won this fight against Adesanya. I know a bunch of you are going to disagree, but a lot of people agree. And if you go look at the public scorecards, most people scored that fight for Robert Whittaker. And ever since his last loss, which was to Adesanya, he really evolved his game. And let's take a look at these takedowns. 4-4-2. 10 takedowns in his last 4 fights. 10 takedowns in 4 fights. Before that, in his first 17 UFC fights, or sorry, first 14 UFC fights, he only had 4 takedowns total. He had more takedowns than that in the Adesanya fight. Even the Kelvin Gastelum fight. Kelvin Gastelum is a wrestler, and Robert Whittaker lit him up on his feet and took him down. And I think it's more of that. Marvin Vettori is a good grappler, and traditionally he's getting his takedowns and he's grinding you out, and that's what he's doing. But the reality is Marvin Vettori has turned into a striker. He just struck with Paulo Costa the entire time. And I don't know if that was because he was afraid of Paulo's BJJ black belt or what, but he struck with Paulo Costa. He stayed there, and he won those striking exchanges. But Robert Whittaker is not Paulo Costa. He will not be there to hit. He's got much better movement. He works in leg kicks. He's not throwing big haymakers. He's just touch, go, touch, go. He's the former champion for a reason. I think Robert Whittaker absolutely gets this done. I'm very, very confident in Robert Whittaker to win this fight. And because of that, I will likely have him in my lineup. And then we have the main event of the evening, Ciryl Gane versus Tai Tuivasa. Listen, I'm not going to overcomplicate this. Ciryl Gane wins this fight. Sure, it's a heavyweight fight. Tai Tuivasa has power in his hands and can land. Even Ciryl Gane said in the press conference, pretty simple game plan. Hit him and don't be there when he tries to hit you. And that is the game plan. And nobody does it better than Ciryl Gane. And yes, he's coming off this loss to Francis Ngannou. That's because he was out-grappled. He won the striking exchanges. He landed more strikes and actually won the striking exchanges. He doesn't have the power, nowhere near the power that Francis or even Tai Tuivasa has. But he's got the footwork, the technique, the cardio, the game planning, the control. He's got everything except now we know takedown defense. And the takedown defense isn't going to matter. Tai Tuivasa has 0 takedowns and 0 takedown attempts in his entire UFC career. I love Tai Tuivasa. I love this man. He's got phenomenal leg kicks, power in his hands, and I love that he is on this 5-fight win streak. I love it. But Ciryl Gane's just a different level, right? Tai Tuivasa is not Derek Lewis, meaning Derek Lewis has big one-punch power. He just waits, throws it. It's just one punch. He just waits. Tai Tuivasa will come forward, will push the pace, he'll kick, and he'll work some footwork. The problem is it's going to be a kickboxing match, and Ciryl Gane's the far, far, far better kickboxer. Obviously, Tai Tuivasa can land the big punch. Nobody in this world would be surprised if that happens. But I got to go with Ciryl Gane. I got to put my lineup at $9,500. And as much as that dude Sean V drives me freaking nuts with his negativity in the comments, he's always got some interesting stats, and one of the stats is something like 89% of the time the $9,500 fighter wins. Something like that, 90-something percent. Something astronomical that fighter wins. And then 75% of the time that fighter's in the optimal lineup. So I think Ciryl Gane gets this done. Tai Tuivasa is live for a knockout, obviously. But I got to go with Ciryl Gane in my lineup, and he'll probably be the first person I put in there. Guys, become a premium member. If you are serious about fantasy, betting, and all those things, it's foolish not to be. It's $10 a month. $10 a month. If this was one of those like feed the homeless kid things, what is that? A quarter a day? For a quarter a day, you could feed me and Jacob and keep our lights on while also getting DraftKings projections, DraftKings optimizers, all of our bets, all of our predictions, all of our raw notes, and everything else in between at just a quarter a day. That math is wrong, but it's $10 a month. WeWantPicks.com. At the top, click Become a Member.